Could you come up with like a quick list of some of the most and easily preventable mistakes for beginners? Just like a high level list where people don't have to go online down the interweb.
In terms of like eliminating a lot of the mistakes that people make, it's really solvable. Almost a large percent of it is based around water. All right. And the way that water affects the soil and then affects the plant, because you're watering the soil, right? You're not watering the plant. The water's in the soil and then the plant's taking up the water. So you have to really think about, as a beginner, the soil as its own separate entity, I think. And people don't give enough thought, and they don't, of course, the information just isn't out there as readily available, or because there's just so much crap out there. You know, I did a video, I think I even did a podcast one time, talking about garden myths. And I looked actually at, just Googled very quickly lists of garden myths, and you could take every single garden myth that they said was a myth, right? They said that this is wrong, but everyone believes it to be true. Well, in some aspects, actually, some of those could be true. Like, yeah, maybe it is a myth in terms of most of the time it's wrong, but sometimes it's right. You know, I think the information just out there is just not very good on soil. And a lot of the soil we get at the store or the big box stores and that's readily available to us is mainly peat moss. And typically that peat moss is then combined with perlite, which is a volcanic rock, or vermiculite. And both of them kind of add some drainage to the perlite. So you need some drainage, not necessarily so that the water will drain out of the bottom of the pot, but so that there's better air in the soil. Because in the soil, you need two things for plants. You don't just need water, actually. You need air. Because if there's no air, the soil becomes anaerobic. And when you have an anaerobic environment, that's like rot. That's like death, right? So you don't want to have that. And that frequently happens in a lot of people's soils, in that the soil life, the microbes become anaerobic, and in turn, the plant that is living doesn't like that, and then the plant starts to rot from the bottom. So the roots of the plant start to die, and then of course when the roots die, the top of the plant then starts to die. And people always look at the top of the plant and they think, well, crap, something happened at the top of my plant. But in reality, it started down in the soil at the bottom. You can't see what was going on. So a lot of times you have to actually take the plant up out of the pot, look at the roots, and say, okay, well, are these healthy roots? Did something happen to the roots? What does the soil look like? Did you actually stick your finger in the soil before you watered the plant? You know what I mean? Like, that's a really simple fix that I think a lot of people are afraid to do. And they're like, well, Ross, how often do I water this thing, right? Because how often you water, or the amount that you water, like I said, fixes the broad spectrum of problems for the most part. So, but people ask me that, how often do you water? Well, I can't tell you how often you water, because guess what? Your environment is totally different than mine. Are you in a house? Are you outside? What's the humidity? How warm is it? How many hours of sunlight do you get? You know, there's so many questions. So the only real answer is you have to stick your own finger in the soil and figure out, well, just how moist is it? Because if it's wet, that's a problem, right? There's different levels. There's dry, there's moist, and then there's wet. You want the plant and the soil to be consistently moist. That is what gives you a green thumb. So if you can do that properly, you're going to have a healthy plant. Now, going back to the soil really quickly, is that this peat moss, usually combined with perlite or vermiculite, unfortunately, still holds a lot of water. So even though they add those rocks for drainage, for air, it still holds a lot of water because peat moss is quite dense. So it's very easy in a lot of these plants to actually overwater them. And combined with the fact that there is a lack of soil microbes. A lot of times they sterilize the soil and then they actually add back in mycorrhizae, which are different types of soil microbes, back into the soil to actually give it some life, right? Compost actually is really a great source of life in the soil.